Welcome to Rico 12. My name is Justin, and I am a child of an all-powerful and all-loving God and a recovering addict, and am blessed to be the host of this meeting and podcast. Rico 12 is an organization with the mission of learning and sharing the similarities of addiction of all kinds, and gaining and sharing tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to gain tools and hope from others who are walking this same path. Speakers from our past meetings have represented very many fellowships, addictions, afflictions, nations, religions, all sorts of things, and we look forward to continuing to add to that diversity of speakers and backgrounds. Today's speaker for the 164th meeting is Harvey E, who will be speaking on the power of pause. By the way, Harvey was the speaker on meeting number 1 almost 3 years ago. He helped kick off the Rico 12 speaker meeting. And there's some unintentional by me symbolism with him being the first guest and the 164th guest. For those who are in the know and who love the big book, there are 164 pages in the meat of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he is the bookends there. So number 1 and number 164. Now, that's kind of cool, but I'm really excited about that. Didn't plan on it, but what a beautiful thing. And by the way, Rico 12 is not done at episode 164. We are booked out until almost October now, well, into October. So we've got a lot more to go, and if you want to speak, we'd love to hear from you. All right. We'll get to his talk and Q&A afterwards in just a minute. First, for some business. The Rico 12 family of recovery resources continues to grow and have more and more resources for the addict and the loved one of those addictions. In addition to Rico 12 speaker meeting that happens at least once a week, we also have Rico 12 shares, which is an asynchronous, open at all times, open to all people, shares only recovery meeting. And you can listen to that anytime on any podcast platform by looking for Rico 12 shares. You can also record a share for Rico 12 shares. If you find some solution, some experience, strength, and hope that you just want to share, go ahead and get on there and do that. The links for doing that will be in the show notes of the meeting, as well as in the chat of the live episode, or of the live recording. We also have the first 164 meeting, which is a partnership between Rico 12 and the recovery guy, Robert P., who has been a speaker on Rico 12 a couple of times. And that meets every Friday on Zoom at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. The link for that will be in the show notes also. A couple of other super exciting projects are on the horizon, and they're quickly approaching in July, and we'll get more information to you as those get closer. Now, your donations and subscriptions are making this all possible, as there are costs to build and maintain all of them. On that note, Rico 12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our 12th step in this manner. We gratefully accept one-time contributions through PayPal and Venmo through the links in the chat and in the show notes. We also offer a monthly subscription program called Rico 12 Spearheads. To join in and help support these cool projects, please consider donating at www.rico12.com/support or click on the link in the show notes of the podcast. We look forward each week and each meeting to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now, here's a little bit about Harvey E., who is speaking to us today. Harvey E. is from Toronto, and he is a 68-year-old Orthodox Jew who, together with his wife Sharon, have 5 married children and 20 grandchildren. He joined SA in January of 2014. His sobriety date is January 7th, 2014, and he joined on the recommendation of his new therapist. At the time, his marriage of 36 years was in serious trouble. He had recently been arrested for acting out behaviors going back 40 years, and he was suffering unbearable shame, shunned by his community and many of his family members. He recently celebrated 3,400 consecutive days of sobriety and recovery from sex addiction. Harvey has embraced a mission of sharing his experience, strength, and hope with others, and has spoken around the world both in person and on phone and Zoom platforms. He is slated to speak at the upcoming International SA Convention in Krakow, Poland in July. All right, Harvey, take it away. The floor is yours.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Harvey E, and I am from Toronto, and I am a grateful recovering sexaholic, a good person worthy of recovery and a child of God, sober since January 7th, 2014, for which I am never sufficiently grateful. Firstly, I would like to thank my dear friend Justin for offering me this opportunity to speak today and for bringing God into this gathering with the recitation of the set-aside prayer, something I always do when I speak. The title of my talk today is The Power of the Pause. And my wish is that through my message, you all will be inspired by this power and come to utilize it in your own journeys. This talk is dedicated in memory of my father, who was born on this day. Tragically, he ended his personal battle with his demons by taking his own life at the age of 45. I pray that by sharing my experience, strength, and hope with you all, I might help each of you in your personal battles and guide you to find peace and serenity, love, hope, and trust. So step 11 reads, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And in discussing this crucial maintenance step, the Big Book addresses the addict and recommends that he pause. I'm referring to the last paragraph on page 87 in the Big Book, which continues on page 88, and it reads as follows. As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. We are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we are burning up energy. We are not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. So let's analyze this paragraph. The first message is we pause. Today, I humbly ask my higher power for the grace to find the space between my impulse and my action, to let flow a cooling breeze when I would respond with heat, to interrupt fierceness with gentle peace, to accept the moment which allows judgment to become discernment, to defer to silence when my tongue would rush to attack or defend. I promise to watch for every opportunity to turn toward my higher power for guidance. I know where this power is. It resides within me, as clear as a mountain brook hidden in the hills. It is the unsuspected inner resource. I thank my higher power for this world of light and truth I see when I allow it to direct my vision. I trust it today and hope it trusts me to make all effort to find the right thought of action today. So let's keep reading. The line continues, when agitated or doubtful. Basically, Bill W. never liked to repeat himself in words, so he always liked to find new ways to say the same thing. So here he found another way of saying restless, irritable, and discontent. And scanning myself throughout the day to determine if I'm feeling any of these is fundamental to my successful recovery. For it becomes the warning light, the signpost that I better do something quick, or I'll need a solution to those feelings, and I know where that could take me. Then, as in many other places in the Big Book, there's a suggestion that I talk to myself. So, isn't that a new idea? Talking to myself, actually having a relationship with me. Who would have thought? So as it reads, we constantly remind ourselves that we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. And little did the pioneers of AA know that one day we would all have a daily reprieve from being thought a little weird or worse when people saw us talking to ourselves. Thanks to cell phones and earbuds, no one need be afraid to do this anymore. And what is this reminder if not a daily sobriety renewal? Rebaptizing myself to the third step surrender I made years ago, requiring the daily work so that I can count on the daily reprieve that the big book speaks about, contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. And as it says on page 85, every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. And isn't that a reworking of the third step decision? As it says on the bottom of page 62. First, we had to stop playing God. Stop playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter, God was going to be my director, my principal, and my father. So today, I understand that the 11th step is the logical extension of step 3. When we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And in handing off to my higher power, my self-will, and entire life, it's then proper that I begin each day and take on any problem by asking through prayer and meditation what his will is for me, instead of plunging into the habit of doing it my way. And in that pause, I can stay away from my way, that as the big book accurately reflects, generated anger, fear, worry, and self-pity, and a host of other destructive feelings. Today, I can do without them. And an easier, softer way is to let a higher power who is stronger and wiser than me call the shots. So let's read on. The next line reads, we are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. When I first came into the rooms of SA, an old-timer gave me an index card on which he wrote 6 dangers on page 88. He said, go home, Harv, read it, and tell me about it tomorrow. I did, and never forgot it, because the first danger was one I quickly learned was a real trigger for me. Excitement. Excitement is the first danger, and excitement is not something I would have thought of as being a trigger for wanting to use my drug. I learned I did not know how to be present without lust, either happy or sad. So let's take a few minutes, just a few minutes, to look at the root of the word excite, the etymology of that word. And it's made up of 2 parts, ex and sight. The prefix ex always means from or from out of, like to excise, to cut from, or to extract, to take from, or to expunge, erase from. So what does sight mean? Where else do we see that suffix? Another common word with that suffix is insight. So what does it mean? Sight comes from the Latin word citare, which means to put into rapid motion, or figuratively, to rouse, to urge, to encourage, to stimulate. So when we put the 2 parts of the word together, we get a sense of rousing or stimulation from out of ourselves, from ourselves and our God-centered life. Can we see how that can be dangerous? Here we're trying to maintain that connection to ourselves and God, and along comes excitement, trying to stimulate me out of myself and away from God. And how did stimulation serve us in the past? Who doesn't remember that? No wonder it's a danger. Here's a classic example of how excitement works in my life. While changing TV channels, I find a 30-minute infomercial describing the advantages of a product I would like to have. 20 minutes later, I'm still watching and contemplating how many of this particular product I could afford. Only when I think about telling my plan to my wife does the insanity of that idea become clear. I do not need this product and have been beguiled with different, better, more. I stop, I pick up a pen, and I do a spot check inventory. Writing out why I want this product highlights my motives and identifies which part of me wants that product. My addict wants me to join in another cycle of lust and regret, give in to desire, grab whatever promises to make me whole. then feel guilt and shame when the lie reveals itself. This is an example of why in step one, I agree I'm powerless over lust and not just over sex. In addition to lengthy commercials that promise to improve my life, I'm intrigued by news articles offering 10 tips to simplify my life, how to get organized or improve my diet. For me, these are another vehicle of lust. They promise to do something positive for me, make my life easier, better, and by extension, it's going to ease any discomfort I might have. Some of them may be helpful, but my life goes a lot better when I use my program tools to identify the helpful from the lustful. So let's look at the other dangers: fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. Fear and worry, anger and self-pity represent the difficult emotions we all face every day. According to Google, self-pity is a synonym for sadness, gloom, grief, sorrow. So if excitement was meant to describe joy, we have all four core emotions. So what's the danger in having emotions? I learned another important message in my recovery journey. Don't let your emotions be your decision maker. Stop and pray. Let God lead you. He sees what you do not see and knows who you do not know. He can change everything in the blink of an eye. Trust in him. Worry is worth commenting on. Worry is a midbrain reptilian response, which does not involve the engagement of the prefrontal cortex. So worry doesn't really give us anything good. Instead, with more time in recovery, we learn to replace worry with concern. Concern engages the prefrontal cortex. So if, for instance, you feel a lump somewhere on your body, instead of ruminating and catastrophizing, spinning your wheels, future tripping, and see yourself dying, never to see your children grow up, etc., and wondering which sin you've committed in your life you're being punished for, concern tells you, I'll leave a message on my doctor's phone and ask him to see me as soon as possible. And that speaks to the final danger. Foolish decisions, they are going to be the result of using my emotions as my decision maker. And as the big book states, one of the greatest promises of the third step is that we begin to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, and the hereafter. Fear is always the consequence of living in self-will and self-reliance. So we come back to the effect of ego on our life. Ego is what brings us to fear and worry, unnecessary anger, and sadness. Here's a list of how we live in ego versus living in God consciousness and awareness. With ego, we see dishonesty, selfishness, complaining, laziness, hatred, jealousy, worry, self-centeredness, arrogance, greed, pride, fear, indecision, violence, indifference, uncertainty, and loneliness. And with awareness, we find generosity, forgiveness, understanding, kindness, honesty, trust, calm, gratitude, efficiency, patience, loyalty, diligence, support, responsibility, and peace. So in that pause that we've been talking about, we should be looking for any signs that ego has once again taken over. And especially true, in that pause, we can find the calm that comes with that connection to God, shutting down the ego, which threatens to kick our higher power off the throne where he belongs. So here are some habits that can help a constantly calmer mind. 1, keep your expectations in check. Expectations are often subtle defense mechanisms against the fear of uncertainty and helplessness. And expectations give us the illusion of control in the short term, but in the long term, all they do is stress us out. 2, take responsibility for your actions, not outcomes. Think of the next right thing, don't worry about it. the outcome. Don't worry about, as my sponsor always used to say, life is none of my business. I don't have to worry about the end result, the destination. I just have to do the next right thing. So if I hold myself responsible for things that I can control and stop holding myself responsible for things I can't control, I make sure that I don't fall into stress and disappointment. Number 3, embrace the joy of missing out. Everybody knows about FOMO. Embracing the joy of missing out simply means that you remind yourself that even though you might well be missing out on something enjoyable or exciting, you're gaining something far greater. The long-term joy that comes from keeping promises to yourself, taking care of your health and well-being, and being free to make decisions based on your values rather than passing whims or fears. Truly calm people are in the habit of making decisions based on their long-term values and well-being, not passing impulses and insecurities. 4, set and enforce healthy boundaries. Having no boundaries means taking on everyone else's problems and stresses as your own. Boy, do I remember doing that. So, of course, you never feel calm. Imagine how much calmer your life would be if you only had to worry about your issues instead of everyone else's too. 5, control your thoughts, not your feelings. Trying to control your feelings is a recipe for chronic stress and frustration because fundamentally, you can. Trying to control the uncontrollable, including your emotions, will always lead to a more stressful mind, not a calmer one. So if you want a calmer mind, you need a better relationship with your emotions. And finally, 6, surround yourself with supportive people. The people you spend time with on a regular basis will have a profound effect on how calm you feel. And I found a couple memes that I thought I'd wanted to share with you. So, as Justin is going to share the screen, being. Today, I trust that just being is enough. Rather than making myself crazy and tired by trying to figure out the answer or see the picture or work out how it will all work out, I choose instead to focus my energy on staying present, enjoying each moment as it presents itself. I open my eyes to life as it is right now. I know the gift of clarity will come when the time is right. And the second meme is with repetition. Your mind believes what you feed it. Feed it love, feed it faith, feed it positivity as often as you can. Because if you don't, it runs its own course, which usually ends up being negative. You have to make the conscious choice over and over until it becomes default. So here's a little exercise for everyone to try. Let's everyone close your eyes. Think about one thing you are grateful to your higher power for, whoever he is. Now, take a few slow, deep breaths in through the nose. Hold it for a few seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. And then exhale slowly through the mouth. Let's do that. And while you're doing that, concentrate on that gratitude. So during the day, know that we can pause where situations must be met and decisions made, and renew the simple request, thy will, not mine, be done. And if at these points our emotional disturbance happens to be great, we will more surely keep our balance if we put this little exercise we just tried into practice, using that gratitude as the simplest prayer to God that we have. Thank you. That will surely aid us in our search for God's will in that moment of stress. So I want to thank you all for letting me share my experience, strength, and hope today with you. And I'm Harvey E, and I pass.
Thank you so much, Harvey. I really appreciate your experience, strength, and hope, the wisdom that you share in these things. Good stuff. I've taken some good notes. I've got some questions written down, and a reminder to our live audience: if you have questions for Harvey, please type them in the Q&A link at the bottom of the window. We'll get to the first question that was posted by our live audience. This is from an anonymous attendee, Harvey. This person asks, "How do you know if it's my will or God's will? How can you differentiate that in your own life?"
Wow, that's a great question. I still I still struggle with that. I think we all do. I don't think you should beat yourself up for that. In fact, I think it's a wonderful understanding that you need to know that, and you need to check yourself. And I think that spot check is about, and if as the book talks about, immediately calling a sponsor. I have been an incredible impersonator of God. I can do an incredible impersonation of Morgan Freeman, whatever, George Burns. There's a Charlton Heston. I can do God in any kind of language, in any kind of, and I would often think that God was speaking to me. I would really believe that. And I would call my sponsor and I would tell him, God spoke to me and he told me I should do this, or I should do that, or I should tell my wife this, or tell my children that, or, treat my patients like this, or whatever. And he would look at, he would say to me, he says, Harvey, he says, that's crap. He says, get on your knees. Go back to him and tell him you're sorry for trying to play God again. So I think that's why we have this. It's one of the best reasons why I have a spiritual mentor or a sponsor, somebody that I can do that check with, because I'm still capable of impersonating God. It doesn't happen as often, I have to admit, after 9 years, but it's still something that I have to think about and be wary of and concerned with. So that was a great question. Thank you.
I love it. And I totally identify with that too. One of the lines from the big book is, we might pay for this presumption that I know what God's thinking of me and all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. And thank you for sharing that. Hey, take this to your sponsor. When I get this thought, this God thought that I think I'm sure is God, I need to run it by somebody who's also in a spiritually healthy place to check that against, is it true? Thank you for sharing that. Any other insights on that based on what I just shared there, Harvey?
No, I think you said it pretty well. I have to tell you that I hope this isn't going to be too controversial, but I know that you're a big fan of the two-way prayer idea. Mm-hmm. I have mentioned it to people and I have encouraged others to try it. And I found in my experience that starting people off in two-way prayer a little too early can have problems, can bring problems, because they get into this habit of believing they're getting a discernment or a prompting, if and sometimes that's and they're convinced, oh, I'm doing two-way prayer, this has to be from God, and I think it's the reason we see that in step 11 we talk about prayer meditation, that it's really meant to be something that we find in our maintenance steps a little further along, not in step 1 or step 2 when we're first just starting this journey.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Harvey. And yeah, I have been guilty of doing that, of saying, hey, let's get you connected with God and get right into two-way prayer. And I've seen the absurd things that get paid for from that. So I think there's some wisdom in what you just shared there. And I also find wisdom in having several prayer partners who are experienced in that, in sharing that two-way prayer, and not just going based off of what I see and hear. Good. All right. The next question I have for you, Harvey, and just like what you shared there, the term excitement being something to be aware of and look out for and watch for, that seems so foreign. But I loved how you broke down the word excite and did that. Tell me, if speak to the newcomer why is something why is excitement something to be aware of? Because I mean, my whole life I've sought that excitement. I've sought that rush and that my addiction gave me and that other things gave me. Why should I be aware of that?
So thank you. I think that in recovery, because lust and the excitement that's attached to that lust is part of our disease, part of what was our acting out behavior. So when we talk about acting out behavior, we always talk about, oh, I went to prostitutes, or I went to massage parlors, or I went to whatever I went to, and that's usually how we talk about, what our acting out behaviors were about. But if we really think about it, it's the excitement and it's the fantasy of what that is all about, and the dreams and the pursuit of it, which is often at the root of that lust. And that's something we learn perhaps a little later on, and with good sponsorship, hopefully a sponsor can help someone see how that's really at the root of where we're at. And what I really want is freedom from that, not the acting out. The acting out, I think I probably could have stopped, maybe, but I didn't, because I was so tied up in that lust of the pursuit and thinking about the excitement of what this was going to bring me, or the pacification of what this was going to bring me. That was also another part of it. So excitement is really, really, and I think the best proof of that is when you meet people who are in long-term recovery, real old timers who have the light on behind their eyes, and you just see the peace of mind, the calm that they live in. And it's so remarkable. And I have a good friend, Nicholas, in England, who I'm going to refer to for a second. And he's a great, he's a mentor. I love him very much. And there was a point in my life a few years ago where I got very excited about wanting to save the world. And I got on my steed, and I was Don Quixote, and I was going to save the world and fight the vanquish the dragon or whatever, or the knights, or the Black Knight or whatever. And I felt myself going very, very deep into a very bad place. And I called Nicholas at 3 a.m. He's in England, so I got away with that. And I called him up, and he said, Harvey, what's going on? And I said, I'm so angry at this guy, and he's doing this, and he's treating our, and he's being rude at our meetings, and I gotta get him out of here, and I gotta tell him to stop. And he's listening to me, and he goes, Harvey, he says, close your eyes. Closing your eyes is a really good part of this program for me. Close your eyes, he said, take some deep breaths, he says, and I want you to work on self-forgetting. He says, start with, forgetting about this crusade that you think you need to go on. He says, if there's anybody else who wants this crusade, let them have it. He says, you got to get off that crusade. He says, because look what it's doing to you. Your pulse is up, your face is red, you are angry, you're angry, and you're self-righteous, that righteous indignation. I have a right to be angry because they're wrong, and it doesn't get me anywhere good. I just have to get off of that because it just doesn't help. So if there's any proof that excitement is a problem, that's the proof for me. It's proof. I've proven it many, many times. So that's I'll pass.
Love that. And I identify that with that very well too. All right. This is from another anonymous attendee. This person says, sometimes I feel like I overanalyze, ruminate, and become overwhelmed when I pause too long while processing feelings and situations. How can I tell when I'm ready to move on to solutions?
Oh, that's a really good question. Wow. That's really, that's an interesting question. What do I do? So I think it's in the pause that you find the calm, and I stay there. It's like, when do I get up from praying? That's just, a lot of people ask me that too. I carry a pillow in my car, and I have pillows all over my house. because the one thing I've learned is my knees don't really handle getting down on them too much. And I've learned by experience that 30 seconds of prayer just don't do it. I need more time, and the same way that in my early work, I stayed on the ground on my knees and prayed and talked to God until the obsession was lifted. I think that's part of the answer. I think that you find a calmness when you've paused enough, when you've brought God into it enough, when you've often had to do some of the work around some of those difficult emotions. I don't like the word negative emotions, but difficult emotions, because we have them. And whoever your God is, he's given us the capability, the capacity to feel. So we're meant to feel. So to turn off feelings or to say, I don't want these feelings, or God, take away those feelings, I don't think that's the way it's meant to go. I think you could be turning God into another addiction and escaping your feelings through God. And I don't think that's what it's about. It's called spiritual bypass. If you're interested, there's actually a book on it. So sometimes I need the time to pause and to do the work around an emotion. So, for instance, if I'm feeling angry about something, I need to, again, I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to use my body. And I don't know if people are aware of this, but somatic work tells us that our bodies actually have a choreography around feelings. And if I'm angry and I close my eyes, I can feel my face feels warm and red. My ears sometimes feel red. My hands are fisted. The muscles of my face are tight. My shoulders are often lifted. I might feel an anvil on my chest. Different feelings give me a different choreography of my body. So I use that to remind myself sometimes to actually discern which feeling I'm actually having. And it's often more than one. I can have sadness, I can have anger at the same time. Sometimes I can have fear and anger at the same time. Emotions aren't one or the other. It can be two or three of them at the same time. So I want my body to help me. I get my body to help me with that. And then I process that anger, because anger, for instance, tells me that a boundary has been violated, either physically or mentally. Something is bothering me because somebody or something has violated a boundary that's important to me, that I need. And then I have to make a decision. If that person stepped on my toe, do I want to never see that person again, or keep my feet underneath my chair going forward, or ask that person, please don't do that again, or realize that he's whatever age he might be or she might be, and they don't know what they're doing, and I have to get to acceptance. So when I get to that acceptance, and I think this is the other half of this answer, when we get to the acceptance of what was exciting us or what feelings we were having, that should bring us, hopefully, to the place of the calm so that we can carry on. And I pass.
Thank you. Thank you, Harvey. All right. Another anonymous attendee asks, Harvey, why do you share your full story each time it's arrest, etc.? Is that so you can be accountable?
Oh, well, I didn't do that. That was Justin. No, I'm kidding. Well, I think that's true. At this point, it's not so much about me, but it's the same reason when I come to meetings, I identify as a same-sex attracted male. And that was my acting out template. And by doing so, first of all, at the beginning, it was because my therapist told me I had to do that. And $200 an hour, I believe you should listen to your therapist. So I did. And he said it's really important for me to identify my template, and especially because I'm same-sex attracted, because it helps me bring the truth to the light, and shame doesn't have place in the light, can't live in the light. And instead of having the emotional, the spiritual athlete's foot of the soul, as Harvey E would call it, I moved away from that. But at the same time, at this point, when I go to meetings and I identify all of my stuff, including my arrests sometimes, I don't really do that so much anymore, but I'm happy with it. But I do definitely talk about some of the consequences of my life because I think it helps people see a person who's recovered and who's been through what I've been through. Not everybody is the same, bottom that I was. I was a really low bottom. But I think it could be something that people appreciate when they see, I hope, 9 years of recovery plus, and hear my story and say, wow, if he could do it, maybe I could do it too. And that's not coming from a haughty place. I listen to Taft Benson's speech all the time. I don't know who knows what that is, but you guys, whoever knows it, knows it. I'll pass.
Awesome. And I'll put these different resources that you've mentioned in the show notes, but good stuff. We have a question here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and answer this. So one of the attendees here is saying, Harvey, can you please be my sponsor? So for anybody who is out there and wants to have contact with Harvey, please send me an email at rico12pod@gmail.com, and I can then send things his way so we don't have his personal information out there for that communication. So send me that email and I'll connect you guys, and then he and you can have that conversation if that's what you want. Harvey, are you okay if I do that?
Certainly. I mean,
awesome.
I was ready to give you my phone number right now.
Yeah. And we don't want to do that over here.
Yeah,
yep. We'll take care of it. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Harvey, another thing that you mentioned that really rings with me, the first habit or the first rule of the 6 that you did there was keeping my expectations in check and trying to, because expectations are really just an illusion of control. And you did a really good job explaining that, but I'd like you to dig a little bit more around that topic of how expectations can really put me in a tailspin in my own serenity and my own peace.
So those of us who grew up with parents, and I hope most of you did, at one point or another, we all, I think, most of us, I shouldn't speak for anybody, I'll speak for myself. I had parents who had great expectations for their children. They had 4 sons, and every one of them was supposed to be not president of the United States because we're Canadian, but doctors, lawyers, dentists, and if we didn't meet those expectations, boy, conditional love was all about those expectations. Yeah, it was hard. And I grew up with the understanding that it's okay to have expectations, and it was part of life, and it was everything I was supposed to be doing. Expectations of myself was a huge part of my early life. And together with that obsession with perfection, which I also got because my parents expected me to be perfect. And if I wasn't perfect, my mother would look at an exam I brought home, for her to see that I got 100 out of 103 because there were 3, extra points. And she would say, what happened to the 3 points? I got 100, Ma, and the next question would be, did anybody get a higher number than you? Higher grade? So I have experienced that. So expectations are what they call premeditated resentments. And I know resentments, as a big book describes, they're our number one killer. And I can't afford resentments. And as my sponsor, Cameron, would say, the most deadly ones are the chicken shit resentments, as he puts it. The little ones that, I don't even want to admit were really a resentment. They were so little, they were so still, and the other thing that I also found, it's very interesting. It's not the first time. I had one guy recently, again, it's not the first time. He did not want to admit or discuss any resentments he had with his wife. And the first guy who did that to me, listen, it's all about me, was my second sponsee ever. And that was eight and a half years ago. And I could not get him to admit that he had a resentment to his wife, Leah. Nothing I could do could get me to, I couldn't go there. I just wouldn't go there. He wouldn't go there. And I realized that he thought it was disrespectful for him to admit that he had a resentment of this poor woman that he had betrayed and that he had hurt so badly. So it was in the way. It was really getting in the way. He couldn't get to that resentment. And I called Cameron, and I remember telling him, I said, Cameron, what do I do? Tim won't admit he has a resentment. Oh, come on. He's married 8 years. How can he not resent his wife? Does anybody? No, no votes. But I don't know. So he said, I got a good idea. He said, go back to Tim next time you see him and ask him to talk about his courtship, how he met Leah, and what happened when he, in the early days. And I did that because that's what Cameron told me to do. And I went back to Tim, and he described his Christian camp that he met her at. She was a counselor. He was a counselor. And how they would have, dances, and he was making the rounds, and, after one girl after the next, he was dating them for a little while and trying to get as whatever he could get. And finally, it was Leah's turn. And it was a really interesting match because he's 6'3" and she's 4'11". But anyway, whatever it was. And they started dating. And the next thing you know, he says, we're engaged. He says, I don't know what happened. He says, she trapped me. He said, was I ever angry? Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. I said, really? Tell us about it. And then the dam was open. He took his finger out of the dam and away he went, and then all the resentments came flying up. So resentments are definitely something that we really have to be careful of. And expectations, if I realize that I have an expectation, aren't I really running the world? Haven't I taken my higher power that I call my Father in heaven off the throne, and I put my expectations on that throne? And my expectations is me, is my ego. It's me. It's not good. So I find, and I'm going to answer just one more little thing, and I say, I realize that the fixing that is actually a two-part work, two pieces to it. The first thing I have to do is get that thing, whatever he or she or it or whatever the idea was, off the throne. Because if I try to talk to God and pray to God when it's still on the throne, he's not on the throne. So I'm not praying to him. I don't have the efficacy of that prayer is just not there. I've got to take that stuff and I got to throw it off the throne and say, God, please come back. Please sit on the throne, your throne. And then I can pray to him for help. So that's how I work. And I pass.
Yeah. Thanks for that imagery and that story and experience. Thank you for that, Harvey. And I have one more question based on your share that I'd like to get to. And if anybody else has a question, please put it in the Q&A link and we'll get to that before we close out here in a few minutes. The third rule or third habit was embrace the joy of missing out. Man, that hit me right between the eyes. I so want to be in the know. I want to know, hey, what kind of experience are you having? I want to do that too. How does one embrace that and count that joy that I'm missing out on something that somebody else is enjoying?
All right. Thank you. That's a great question too. And I have an essay. And again, if somebody asks for this, I can send it to you and you can borrow it and send it around. But there was an essay that I saw early on in my recovery that the title of it is something like, I don't need to know. If I remember correctly, I think that's the title. And that was a really, really heavy place that I had to realize that I had lived in that analytical place that somebody already spoke about. Part of that analysis thing is I need to be able to take this thing apart and see how it works. I used to do that. I used to take radios, rip them apart, and try to put them back together again. I wasn't very good at putting them back together again, but I was really good at taking them apart. I just wanted to know where the feet came from. Like, where did the feet come out of, as my mother would say in Yiddish, wann at the feet wachsen? Where did the feet grow out of? And it was really, that was me. And I needed to know, and of course, the part of the fantasy, part of the that stuff that we were talking about before, the base of my lust, which is really about the pursuit and the need to find out, to need to know, the need to get that, to discover who this is and what that person might be. And that need to know, it used to drive me nuts. I would see somebody and, I'd want to know, what they look like, whatever. And we won't go into detail, but, needing to know is really not a good place. I mean, it just fed the lust and it fed my fantasy and it fed all of that stuff. And I just know right now that if I need to know, there's probably something wrong because, and I have to tell you, I'll close with this little point. We do the third step prayer and it says, take away my difficulties. What are my difficulties? My difficulty is still that need to know, because thankfully after 9 years, I really truly believe that I'm letting God drive the bus. I can sit in the back seat of the car, of the truck, of the bus, whatever I'm in, and I can enjoy the ride. I really can, except every so often, damn it, I want to lean over the seat and look at the GPS and see where the heck he's taking me. Because I still need to know, in spiritual kindergarten that I'm living in, and it's, maybe I'm in grade 1 now, I don't know, but I know I started off in kindergarten. I needed to know because it made me crazy. Where are you taking me, God? What's going on? Where is the world unfolding? How is the world unfolding for me? And every time I let go and I let God, the results are so beautiful. Really, they are. They're not always there, very often, not what my expectations were. I could think of 3 ways this world should unfold right this minute. And God has 600 of them that are all better than those 3. I think it says something like that in the 12 and 12. Yeah, that's me. I pass.
Love it. Thank you so much, Harvey. All right. Before we close up here, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with us before we move into the closing reading and launch out of here?
Yeah. So I think that what I've learned that I would share as just to finish up here is that there's so much beauty and so much love in this world and so much hope in this world. And in recovery, many of us, and myself included, we can get bogged down with the negative stuff, especially in early, step 0, step 1, step 2. There's so much, I'm not allowed to do this, and I can't do that, and I have to filter like this, and I have to not to go into this part of town. I can't drive here, and I can't eat this. And there's so many no's, like, no, I can't do this. I can't. And compliance is hard, and acceptance takes a long time to get to. And compliance is going to eventually tire us out because it's tiring, and everybody who's been through this will probably remember, if they're in recovery or they may know it right now, the pain of sobriety is just that. It's awfully painful. And who wants to live like that? I want to live in recovery. And thankfully, recovery is where I am living today. And I think it's really, really I started to find that when I turned my life around and became positive. And the habits that I found and took on, like prayer and meditation and inviting God into my car. And and I actually do this, and I say, God, we're going to work now. Get in the car with me, and we travel together, and stuff like that, and making phone calls and all the things that I'm sure everybody's heard of, and their sponsors have given them those suggestions. The positive stuff that takes the place of the negative is really where I want to live, and that's what I really want to focus on and see the positive beauty of how life can be. And how I want life and I wish my life can be and wants to be, instead of focusing on, I can't do this and I can't do that, because that's really hard. So I think that's my message.
Beautiful. Love it. Love it. Thank you. Thanks again, Harvey. That was a great RICO 12 meeting for all of us. If we didn't get to your question, or if you have other questions to our live audience or those out there listening, if you have questions, please consider joining our WhatsApp community by sending an email to me at rico12pod@gmail.com. Send an email to me if you want contact with Harvey there at that same place, and we'll get to that and get you connected. If you're inspired and want to share something of your insights in a 12-step type share, please go to the RICO 12 Shares SpeakPipe link that I've put in the chat a couple of times and record your 2 to 4 minute share there. If you've not yet rated and reviewed the podcast in Apple Podcasts, please go do so now. It's a great way to work step 12 and sharing this message with others. I invite the audience to come back next week. Ril C, who has been diligently working her recovery for over 14 years as the wife of a sex addict, will be joining us next week at 1:00 p.m. Eastern Time, speaking to us on the topic of detaching with love. And this will be Ril's first time on RICO 12. Excited to have her here. Now let's launch off into the rest of our day with this prayer of St. Francis that Harvey will say.
Okay, so let's take a moment to meditate for a second on the those of us who are in these rooms and those of us who are still not in these rooms, those of us who have been impacted, those who have been impacted by our diseases, with some of us who are even have been or are presently incarcerated. Let's take that moment now. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace, that where there is hatred, let me sow love, that where there is injury, let me sow forgiveness, that where there is discord, let me sow harmony, that where there is error, may I bring truth, that where there is doubt, may I bring faith, that where there is despair, may I bring hope, that where there are shadows, may I bring light. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by giving that we receive, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, and it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Harvey. Keep coming back, everybody. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight, still searching for glimmers